uh, the constant apprehension people have, especially in poor areas of town, where you could say they're disadvantaged people, caused by the very fact that there are cops. Cops per se are an inhibiting factor toward growth and prosperity, despite what Mayor Andy Burke thinks in his State of the City speech yesterday. Cops are a not a deterrent of crime primarily; they're a deterrent of growth and prosperity, because they constantly subject the people, most of whom are innocent of any crime at all, to an activity called law enforcement. And law enforcement is a skimming. It is part of the state government's skimming economy. It is an operation of the deep state. And as we're exploring here on the David Tula Show and at Euronews.com and also Nuganomics.com, it is the deep state operating outside the law, outside the statute. And we have a story that we're developing with a defendant at East Ridge, Mr. Woods, who is a victim of a deep state secret. It is a secret that people who follow David Tulis can learn about, and if they haven't already heard about how it works. And so you have to kind of stay tuned here and subscribe to Nuganomics.com to keep posted on how the deep state works against individuals, creating an aura of compulsion, an aura of fear. Now, David Allen Carmichael in Virginia is a man of remarkable note. In fact, he's so remarkable as an individual that I have made him a correspondent of our radio station, Nuga Radio. And he heard our interview with John Wolf, the attorney, about two cases in very rough-hewn, and you might say mean, Bradley County, Tennessee. And so I have him on the phone to tell us about a similar case in Virginia that he is pursuing. David, what's my listener to hear about the standard operation of policing in your neck of the woods?
Well, what happened, I'll tell you the situation, then I'll tell you what we did as investigative journalism, actually doing Freedom of Information Act requests from the government, and it's amazing what we found that's really going to help the man. And I was holding on to the story to get more information, and I want to keep some of it a little bit private so we don't throw the guy's case under the bus or whatever. The situation is you're driving on the road. And
was he driving or traveling?
It's in an isolated place where you can't see it, you can't avoid it. It's kind of mandatory. And they pulled him over and said, "We want to see your ID." And so he says, "Am I under arrest?" He says, "No, you're under arrest. We just need to see your ID, buddy." Well, if I'm not under arrest, am I free to go? He said, "No, you're not free to go." So they had that little debate for about 33 minutes. And this gentleman knows enough to know that they're violating the Constitution. And it goes with what you said. If you have, with much knowledge comes much sorrow. And so this man's had a lot of sorrow in the past. He's been put in jail 105 days because the last time they did this, or the first time they did it, he challenged the court's jurisdiction. And because he did that, they put him in jail for 105 days until he stopped making that statement. And they basically said, "Well, I think you're crazy. So until you capitulate, we're going to just keep putting you in jail every 30 days. And it was completely arbitrary. So he's used to being abused by this county. And so when he gets pulled over, he challenges them. And he recorded it. And so the entire record is, "I want to see your ID." And it's basically, by what authority? Says the Supreme Court says you can't do this, that you can ask your questions, and I do not consent, and I'm free to go. Am I free to go? No. Am I under arrest? No. And then what they did is he had his window kind of rolled up and his door locked. They never said unlock your door because it's recorded. They didn't say you're under arrest. They busted his window out, shattered all over his face. They pull him out of the car. And then after they cuff him, and he mentioned throughout the conversation, he says, I don't have to answer any of your questions. And so they arrest him for obstruction of justice. So essentially, if you don't show me your papers, there's a fine against showing your papers. It turns out if you read the law, you're not required. It says a person operating motor vehicle is required to do except for item such and such. And it cites the criminal code. The criminal code tells the police officers that they can't search anybody without a warrant. And it says, and under that code, it says, well, there's certain things you can do, like you can inspect a boat or something like that. But if you connect the dots in the statute, the officer has no authority. And we found this in our, just doing our research. It turns out, actually, the officer has no authority to even ask the guy. It's called a field interview. And then in our FOIA, that I submitted, I did it for the American Christian Liberty Society, and I said, courtesy copy CBS News affiliate. And so they sent me this information. We got all the police training manuals, and it says what this thing's called. It's called a field interview, and it says in the field interview, compliance is it's got to be consensual, and if they don't consent, you have to let them go. So it's in their police training, but yet because he wouldn't either prove that he wasn't committing a Class 2 misdemeanor driving without a license, or prove that he was or wasn't going to give us papers, which would have a $10 fine or whatever it is, something ridiculous. So it's basically you're going to prove you are a criminal, or you're going to prove you're not a criminal. And if you don't comply with this, we're going to charge you with obstruction of justice. And they put him in jail. And there's more details to it. There's a little abusive things that happen. The other thing is he got his car there, and they left it out in the middle of the street, had busted glass. So they had it towed away, and he asked, will you sign here, give us permission to tow your car away? He says, no, my father-in-law is coming. He'll be here in a few minutes. So his father-in-law shows up, and the car's still sitting in the middle of the street. They wouldn't give the father-in-law the car. Now, we found in the FOIA that the police training, they're actually required to take a test to demonstrate they can push a car off the road into the area. And under these safety inspection checks, they're supposed to have space on the side of the road that they can have a car stop or be pushed to. So they had his car towed, notwithstanding his family member was there, and they're trained and instructed in this whole process to actually have a space for a car and to be able to push it out of the way. So there's a whole bunch of things besides this false imprisonment, false arrest, and things like that. And that's a quick summary. Oh, I got to tell you more.
Go ahead.
At this point, he doesn't know what he's doing. He's a guy, he's a common man, and he knows the law, but he's not able to defend himself and do process things like that. So what I did is I provided him with all our FOIA responses, which were huge and just incredibly valuable. And then a little bit of assistance typing what he's now doing. He's deposing the 4 officers. He's actually got the prosecutor looking at the paperwork that's gotten her, and she said to him, I can't prosecute off of this. And of course, it was a false arrest, false imprisonment. It was a joke, but it's standard procedure for the police department and the local judge who just kind of rubber stamps it and throws people in jail. So what we did was, it's him. He tells me what he wants, and I type it out in discernible language. And he's deposing 4 of the police officers, the man, the one that was there with the camera in his car, the supervisor that demanded it, and the guy who's in charge of these, what they call checking details. So they're being deposed. And so he's actually doing the discovery for his defense, and they have to answer the questions. Now, the problem is each of those guys are going to be making statements that makes them personally suable, if not criminally liable. Now, the problem is he doesn't have a lawyer. So I was like, I got to talk to this John Wolf guy, because he's fumbling it through it. But what's amazing, they've never seen anybody actually do a defense. And you got to realize that there's lawyers in there every day taking money for people and throwing them under the bus to this judge. Nobody ever actually does the due process, constitutional rights, notwithstanding they're getting paid to do it in this county.
We're talking with David Allen Carmichael, who is our CBS affiliate correspondent in Virginia. He's a remarkable man himself. He's sued and defended rights of religious conscience on not having a social security number while being a man aboard a nuclear submarine in the Navy. And there's a whole story there that maybe we can hear about another time. David Allen Carmichael, tell my listener why he should care about these things. For him, the listener, this is all kind of interesting and kind of almost amusing and a little bit sad. But he keeps thinking, well, this doesn't really apply to me. I don't have enough here to use. I hear these stories from David Toulis and John Wolf and others. And somehow I just can't really gather enough in my mind and in my heart to use this. How can he gather some of the things you're saying? Not just necessarily technique or anything, or legal technique, but what should he gather kind of in his mind and soul about defending himself, defending other people, and caring about this issue enough to make some changes in his life, in his town?
Okay, I'm going to kind of go in reverse logic here backwards. I'm going to do what might have been just emphasis here. Look what's happening in California, where they're going to try to pass a bill that effectively would say, if you got a Bible, you're violating the law. So what happens when the guy pulls you over and then roughs you up and sicks his dog on you because you got a Bible. I mean, that's where this is going. Okay, so it's not touching you right now, and you're supposed to submit to every ordinance of man. No, that it's to submit to the authority. And what's happening is, especially interested are those who have served in the military, have given an oath to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. It's not with guns overseas; it's right here on the ground. So there's a point when you have that knowledge and the duty. Like they pull me over. Oh, if I don't give my paperwork, which they don't have the lawful requirement to ask, they're going to stick their dog in me, throw me in jail, treat me like a jerk, and it's going to ruin my life. I'm not going to be able to go to job,
call me names,
to my job and things like that. So what's happening is violating your conscience right now. People in America know enough to know when they get pulled over to the fake safety checkpoint that it's systemically wrong. It's innately wrong. It's innately a violation to whatever it is that we're supposed to be standing for here in the country. And what I'm saying is it's coming to you eventually. Like, you know what I mean? It's when you see this arbitrary attack using the power of the sword on this guy. Oh, it doesn't matter ways. He may have done some misdeeds in the past. He may be getting his life together, but for the fact he keeps getting attacked by dogs and thrown in jail. So I think there's a point where it's going to come to us eventually if we do not stand.
And so what you're suggesting to my listener is that what can he do? Say no? I think perhaps maybe the listener would be best served, David Allen Carmichael, if he asked the following question. Effectively, it's correcting a spelling error. The spelling error is we all say on, O-N, when we should be saying no, N-O. And the question that rises from the correct spelling of that word is, can you state your authority?
Yeah, that's a question. I've been pulled over a couple of times, and I said, well, actually, I told the first time, and again, I've been trying to get a driver's license for 20 years, but without a social security number. And I've gotten children, I've gotten other people to get driver's licenses without a number. For whatever reason, I am the guy who can't. And I think it may be a divine intervention. How else am I going to fight unless I have a reason to fight? Right?
Right.
So I'm helping other people, but one of the things that I learned when I get pulled over, I tell them, I sing a song. I tell them enough to put me in jail. And I've had state policemen say, Mr. Carmichael, you go on your way, have a good job, day, drive safely. I look forward to hearing more about you. That's actually been said to me. So I know that I say enough to put me in jail. I don't plead the fifth. The last time I got pulled over a safety inspection, I had a young man. I told him so much that he had put me in jail on a Friday. You're not going to see the magistrate till Monday. I mean, it was going to be awkward, And he didn't know what to do. So he gets his next immediate supervisor, who's a guy in his 30s. He comes up and talks to the 50-year-old David, and he's abusive. And why don't you want to give us a social security number? And he's being rude to me. So now I say, and I go from my, hey, officer, here, put me in jail, to, by what authority you ask me this question, young man? Do not be rude to me. You have no authority to speak rudely to your elders. Where's your supervisor? Oh, you're going to be like that. You're going to be tough. I said, by what authority are you pulling me over? Oh, you're going to ask that? By what authority you ask me a question? I'm not going to say a thing to you unless you can show me by what authority. So I'm actually like being belligerent. So he gets his supervisor, who's in his 40s, comes over and treats me with respect. I tell his supervisor enough to put me in jail on Friday. The supervisor listens to the story, and the first guy broke me for driving without a license. I ended up paying a $25 fine because the judge thought it was going to get overturned in the appeals court. With the appeals court, and if it's not at least a $500 fine, they don't have to look at it. So they didn't. So it was kind of a strange exercise. But the supervisor listens to my story. Says, I can't do anything. This guy's already cited you. But he says, go ahead and go on your way. So the supervisor lets me drive on my way without a license, supposedly a class 2 misdemeanor. I think it's a matter of being truthful, to being honest, to being loving, to being open. But it is one of these things where you come to these situations, you should be as loving to and respectful to that officer until they step out of their true position as a minister of God for our good. I don't really know what else to tell people. That's kind of my experience. But there's a point where you and I have to take authority. Oh, I want to tell you, in the Freedom of Information Act request response from the state police, in their training, one of the first points they make is the people are the police. The police are the people. And of course, the constitutions of this various states say that really this authority is derived from the people. If I don't have the authority to be mean to that police officer, I don't have the authority to delegate that authority for him to be mean to me.
There's a deep state operation, David Allen Carmichael in Tennessee, and I just want to mention it to you just briefly. It's pertaining to a case that's typical of hundreds of cases in the Hamilton County area. His name is Omariel Woods, young man arrested in East Ridge. He had his driver license revoked, David Allen Carmichael, because he had unpaid fees and penalties. He was in Silverdale jail, and he racked up a bill. He came out of that jail with a bill, he said, of $14,000. He couldn't pay it, and so guess what? His driver's license was revoked when by message from a court, one court or another, and for non-payment. And so he didn't know it, and he was charged with revoked. The cause of the arrest in East Ridge, Tennessee, was a tag light was out, a tag indicating presumptively that you're involved in commerce. So he said, "Well, I don't have a license," and he was charged with driving without a license, which is not a real charge. I'm not sure exact. No, he was charged with driving on revoked. And so I said, Omariel, how did you get a revoked license? He said, well, I don't know. I've never applied for one. And I in the past 3 years, have done some open records requests, David Allen, with the state of Tennessee, asking what protocol exists for there to be a license granted to someone who never applied for it, and then that license be revoked. And it came out in a memorandum by a federal district Judge Alita Trauger just a few days ago, in which she says that David Perkey, the Commissioner of Safety, admitted that it happens this way, and it's without any authority. There's no protocol, there's no law that allows this to happen, but it's done anyway. And I call it authority ex nihilo, authority from nowhere to do something. And that is give a license to someone who never applied for it, didn't pay the fee for it, so that it might be revoked. And she says in her ruling, she says, an individual may be treated as having a revoked license, even though he was not licensed to drive by the state of Tennessee as an initial matter. The department simply assigns such a person a driver's license number and classifies the corresponding, quote, license, quote unquote, as revoked. And it does it the day it gets the notice from the court of an unpaid fine.
Beautiful statement. Let me tell you, in this deposition, what was put to the prosecutor is evidence of a suspended license. That's what they charge him with, a suspended license. And so the evidence of ever having a license, evidence of a license ever being suspended. And so he's never had the license. He's never had it suspended, yet this is the third time that they've charged him. In one instance, I don't want to get into too much detail, so I'm going to hold on to some of the detail, because then they'll be able to really figure out who the person is, very squarely. What happens is they continue to do that. But in this case, it is subpoena ducis tecum, saying you're going to provide the following documents under penalty. So what it's going to expose is not only the fraud of this charge, but the fraud of the previous charge and the fraud of the previous charge. And now when these things are discovered, some of those previous charges, there's things that can be done criminally, civilly, quo warranto. There's a whole bunch of things that are lining up here, because this guy just wants to be left alone, but they continue to poke him in the eyes, right? But that's what's going on. It's complete fraud, and you have to do something about it. And this guy's in a difficult situation because it's trickery, it's satanic, it's lawless. So I think your friend Mr. Wolf that you talked to, I think you need to have guys like that, and to find people like that hold them accountable, both the government accountable if they provide sovereign immunity waiver to sue the government, and also the person himself, the police officer who's acting out under the color of law, and to sue the living daylights out of them.
Right. These people, David Allen Carmichael, they're acting. If they don't, I think a main premise in law is that an authority, a state actor who acts outside of lawful authority, is effectively acting in his own personal capacity. And so what we have to do is make sure that all these state actors, these employees of counties and cities, know that if they're acting outside lawful authority, they are personally vulnerable, personally liable for damages. Enjoy that nice new couch you bought for your wife and family, because that may soon belong to me if you've acted personally against me, oppressing me outside of law.
That's right. And you know what? Go with what Martin Luther King said in his letter to Birmingham jail, from the Birmingham jail, is you've got to, he was, let's say he was with protesting against the color of law, he was marching without a permit. So like driving, whatever your without a permit issue is, you got to do it openly, lovingly, being willing to take the hit, but then also you take the hit and you take that hit injury and take it right back to them. The very fact and the difficult thing is a horrible attack, maiming by the dog or by the policeman using the dog tool. That's horrible. It's life-changing, PTSD kind of thing. You can't sue somebody unless you've been injured. But once you're injured, now you have a cause for action. Actually, the common law kicks in.
And that really
there's a moral wrong that happens.
David, what that requires is the person who's doing this has to act like Christ, self-sacrificially. Like you say, you have to accept an injury to have a cause. You have to accept being abused. You have to know that at some point your life is going to be messed up. You're going to be injured either physically or in the use of your time and your energy. You'll be seized and put in jail, forced to make bond, etc. And you were going to a wedding event with your wife, and here, oh no, my husband has disappeared and he's not answering his phone, and then he's gone a whole weekend because he didn't call home. He called an attorney, and so the poor wife, there's that distress of the victim. But the listener should think about acting self-sacrificially on behalf of others. And every victim, David Allen Carmichael, represents his people, whoever those people are. They may be Hispanic, they may be Christian, they may be Black, African American, they may be the poor. And so when you're a victim who accepts in God's providence that you've been victimized, you now turn that to advantage. You turn that to advantage of other people whom you represent, even though you may not be have grounds for a class action suit, or especially if you're defending yourself. You represent your people, and you do it. You do that with a sense of encouragement and nobility, because you represent, like Christ represents his people before God the Father. This victim, this defense victim, this plaintiff represents people in like situation, acting on their behalf. Yes.
So it's kind of one of the things, you push the button, what's going on here. We're hoping, for the sake of Nooga Radio, is that, as things develop and, we got a little more solid report that ought to be published, that my hope was David Toulis maybe doing the written publication of it. And, so I'm keeping things, we've got some serious 3-ring binders here of a lot of interesting information. But you can't just blast it all out like a shotgun.
No, it has to be written. Well, listen, David Allen Carmichael, thank you for joining us, David.
Okay. You have a good day, David.
We've been hearing from David Allen Carmichael, who is our correspondent in Virginia, and he's telling us about a light case there. And we are concerned about the deep state. We want the state, we want the government to obey the law. We are all for the law. And that the big project I'm involved in is the Transportation Administrative Notice, which is a liberating document. It liberates mayors, county governments, from city governments from the need to enforce Title 55 wrongly, which is the custom. It is wrongly and overbroadly enforced. David Toulis, and now some messages.